Welcome to Biz Help for You with host Candy Messer. Entrepreneurs like to focus on the big picture, like profitability, success, and a smooth running organization. But there always seems to be those little things like taxes, employee compensation, laws, regulations, and more. Now you can get the answers you need in one place. Join us today as we break it all down for you. Now, here's your host, Candy Messer.
Hello and welcome to Biz Help for You with Candy Messer. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed the topic of our last episode, 3 lessons from the ashes of my business failure. If you are unable to join us and would like to listen to the show, links can be found on our YouTube and Facebook pages, as well as multiple favorite podcast platforms. And if you'd like to receive notifications on when our podcasts have been uploaded, please like and subscribe. Now, let's learn a little bit about our guest today. Mia Moran is a mom of 3 and coach who has struck her perfect balance between motherhood, wellness, and work. She supports high-achieving female entrepreneurs who are overwhelmed with the life and wellness pieces and helps them find their version of balance. She is the host of the Plan Simple podcast, best-selling author of Plan Simple Meals, and creator of the Flow Planning Method, the Flow Planner, and Flow 365. Mia's wellness adventure became a full-blown ride about 12 years ago during a health crisis when she understood the power food could have on her health, her connection with her kids, and her productivity. That experience led her to become a student of food, wellness, spirituality, motherhood, and productivity while running a successful design company. She experienced 2 unforeseen gifts from this journey. First, the practice of finding ease despite balancing what looks like a full plate of work, home, motherhood, and food. Second, the gift of a good plan. So Mia, welcome to the show.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. It's always so funny being introduced listening to yourself in that way.
Right. But I always want listeners to have a background, of the people who are sharing, but that is such a small amount that I shared. So I always like to ask first, just tell us a little bit more about yourself and how did you get into mentoring women on the balance between work and the life that we all have to lead?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, mostly because I had hit a point where I needed the same thing many years ago. So I'm actually a graphic designer by trade. I've always been an entrepreneur, but at the time of sort of my health transformation, it was about 12 or 13 years ago, and I had built this graphic design company. And I had my 3 kids I just released, actually, as we're recording this, the first one to college yesterday, which is unbelievable. But at the time they were all under 5, and I sort of had checked off all the boxes, like all the things I had wanted to do. I was in my early 30s. That all felt really good. And yet there's this hidden sense of like unhappiness. And at the time I was just I think my youngest was, almost 1, and I knew that I was good. And so the thing that I just was feeling a little detached from was my body. I had gained a lot of weight in my pregnancies, and I just wasn't feeling good. And I didn't know there was really anything better, but I think I sensed that maybe there was. And so I sought out this health transformation. I really sought to lose weight, and it became a health transformation. And it was after a day where I just had looked across my desk at 3 p.m., knowing that I had to go home shortly, at like a stack of way too many coffee cups, and just wondering how I could have consumed this much caffeine and still be this tired. And so that sort of one thing led to another. Really, it was one step at a time. I went to a yoga class. I figured out what to eat. As somebody who didn't cook, I changed everything. But as I made these little steps, everything started changing in like really big ways. And it was confusing to me because there was many things I had always wanted in life, but I always thought that like if the things I wanted were so big that I must have to show up in a really big way to get them. And this was really the first time where I was like, oh, the little things really do add up. And so one thing led to another, and literally like a lot of little things led to another. But I ended up writing a book on food and family because in my path, as I got healthier, which I did 100% on my own, like myself, not on my kids at first. But when I felt really good and got off all this medication that I had been on and lost a lot of weight, I knew that like I had to raise my kids in a way that like they understood this, as well. And so I ended up writing this book called Plan Simple Meals, which was about really how to get food on the table as somebody who was busy and maybe not all your kids wanted to eat and all the things. And I went on a book tour for that book and thought I was going to teach people about kale, which when I started didn't know about, but everyone in my audience knew about kale. And I realized that the biggest problem was time, and that there was so many people who wanted to be healthy, but just couldn't figure out how to get the time. So that's the long of the short of how I got into really wanting to figure out a new way, like not a new way, but a more aligned way for women to navigate time, because we've taken on so much more in the last decades than we've ever taken on, historically in the past. And so I knew that how we manage our energy and our time had to respond in a better way.
Well, and I think as not just entrepreneurs, because there's a lot of people who are in corporate as well too, who have been told, really, you can have it all. You can have a career, you could be a mom or even a dad, although in this case, we're talking a lot to women today, but you can have it all. How do we actually have it all and maintain this balance? Or is that not even true? Is it not really balanced? Like, let's talk about that.
It's this weird thing, because I feel like, especially right now, like with Instagram, but 12 years ago, that didn't really exist. So like magazine culture, TV culture has sort of always given us this like little bit of hope that we could have it all. But really the way society is set up, it's asking us to choose on a pretty regular basis. It's supporting this idea that like, actually we can't have it all. And so I think there's this like push pull that goes on for many women, like, oh, I choose to go back to work and I must not be a good mother. Like I decide to be a mother, I can't do the work I love. And, I feel like that's the primary choice, much less like take good care of ourselves. Like that feels like the way tertiary thing that we can't like, just, it's not set up for our success in that way, especially I would say in the US and Canada, like, I feel like some other places have this a little bit better than we do, but here we really, really, really do have to choose. And or we're told we have to choose. I don't believe we have to choose. And so I think a lot of it is just really getting clear on what it is that we each want, which might be different than what Instagram and YouTube and magazines and TV and all the things are telling us we should want. And that was my big thing, was I had checked off all these boxes, but I realized they weren't really my boxes. Like I didn't even care about them really. And so once I really figured out what mattered, then then I was aligned enough to put all the pieces together to figure out how to quote unquote have it all, because it was my all. It wasn't your all. It wasn't my neighbor's all. It was like, literally, this is what I want. I want to be able to be a mother in this way. I want to be able to make money in this way. I want to be able to take care of my body in this way. And it's also always evolving, right? Like in my 30s, it's very different than it is now as I'm approaching 50. It's like just a whole different ballgame, right? And it's changed along the way with the age of my kids, with the evolution of my business, as my body changes. And so it's like always this reevaluation of, I think, like, what does all mean for me right now? I think that's really the most important question.
I think that's a great point too. And I have a friend that is a business owner, and she had at one point too a written, print magazine too, not just online. And that of course had a much more defined deadline on things. And she used to say, for me, balance is not like even every day for like my family and my work. Sometimes work is going to take a little bit more time. And my family just has to realize, and I'll tell them, like, for these few days, I am not going to have as much free time to spend with you. I'm going to do this. But then when the deadline is hit and we're going to print, then I have these extra hours on these days I get to spend with you. So her definition of balance was not like balance every day, everything's perfect. It's still balancing the needs of the business, balancing the needs of the family. So I think it's important for people to realize too, when you're looking at balance, your definition anyway, it doesn't even mean that you have to have everything perfectly balanced every day. It's just making sure you have a balanced life, right?
Yeah, and what's really important about that is that balance, it actually doesn't even have to do with what's happening. It doesn't have to do with the work it's a
Hmm.
feeling, right?
Hmm.
And so if I'm in alignment with what I want, I'm going to feel really good. And some days feeling really good is getting all the work things done. And
Hmm.
sometimes feeling really good is about decluttering a small corner. And sometimes feeling good is about, remembering to hug someone. And so it's like, it's really about being in alignment so that like balance is about what you're meant to be doing. It has less to do with what's actually happening on the outside. And I think that's where we really start to get into trouble, because then it
Hmm.
becomes like this Jenga game where we're like trying to fit all the pieces together, but we're not even connected to what pieces we really want.
Hmm. So if someone's listening and they're like, okay, well, that sounds great. I do want to figure out what balance means to me and what that feeling is. But right now, my feeling is overwhelm, right? I have a million things on my to-do list, whether it's home, whether it's work, whether it's all of it. So what do I do if I'm feeling in overwhelm?
Yeah. So first of all, if it had like a lot of times for women, overwhelm does have a lot to do with what you just said, which is this like to-do list, which is
Hmm.
never ending. And we keep, every time we take something off, it feels like there's 3 things that we add to it. Right. And so I think a lot of us live from that list a lot of the time.
Hmm.
So I think the two important things actually live on either side of the to-do list. So, um, sort of before rewriting, coming into relationship with the to-do list, what I love doing is really making sure that how I'm living my life, what I'm planning for, is really in alignment with my future self.
Hmm.
And the easiest way to explain this is like with health. Like if I want to get healthy, I may decide that I need to eat more veggies. I might not eat cake every day, like whatever. And so I can decide that now and feel really good about the fact that I'm not going to have cake anymore, right? But if
Hmm.
I don't plan for that and I'm planning for how I am right now, so if I'm planning for my future self knows that I don't need cake right now and feels really good about that. If I'm planning for my right now self, I'm totally going to like make a case for cake because right now I can eat a
Right.
piece of cake and I might feel like a little bad for 5 minutes, but then that goes away and then I'm fine.
Hmm.
Right. And so I love the idea that who we're planning for is like our 5-year self, our 10-year self. It's not about our today's self when we're talking about those meaningful things that really add up over time.
Hmm.
And so what I love, the easiest way I find to connect with that future self is so simple. It's literally just closing your eyes. I love the concept of I don't know if we're doing video, but I'm holding up my phone. Um,
Hmm.
I love the concept of setting a timer for, I don't know, a minute, 90 seconds, 5 minutes. Like it doesn't have to be a long time. And just closing our eyes and literally imagining what it's going to be like 5 or 10 years from now. And a lot of
Hmm.
times when we allow ourselves to go out in time, we can connect to that feeling of balance because we can, our brain can just get to a place where it's like not worried about the today's to-do list. It's not worried about like the workload today. It's not worried about the kids today. It's not worried about our body today. It can like imagine that it's going to be okay. And so you
Hmm.
sort of start to see things and start to feel things. Um, that are in, part of your future self. So I love going there before I sit down to do a brain dump or a to-do list or whatever you want to call it, because that way I'm just in a little bit more informed place. And I do that
Hmm.
exercise like often, daily, multiple times a day, especially if I'm in sort of overwhelm around something or there's a lot going on. So that's definitely something that I think is helpful. And then we get these lists. And I think part of it is then, and lists are creative. Like lists are actually a really great way for a woman to get things out of their head and onto paper, which can be really helpful because the more we hold in our head, which we do a lot as women, like that creates overwhelm. So
Right.
if your to-do list that we're talking about that feels overwhelming is just in your head, definitely get it out of paper because just the
Hmm.
act of that can really help sort of settle the nervous system and help you feel a little bit more at ease around all the things that at some point you're going to do. But then on the other side of to-do list, the thing that we don't often do, especially with the things that we're talking about, which might really matter in the balance scenario, is we don't put them into time. And the thing is that when we have an idea, like our mind just assumes it's done, right? And then we go into overwhelm and we start doubting that we can do this thing. But our mind is like, it's done the second it's on that to-do list because it knows that we can do it. That's why it allowed us to have that thought to begin with, right? And so our job then becomes like, all right, great. I have this list of things. Like, when am I going to do them? And so if you know, and it doesn't have to be like, it doesn't have to fill whole days usually, but it's really helpful just to be like, okay, I'm going to work on this project. I'll do this for 3 hours on this morning. And great, I want to make dinner every night this fall. Okay, that's going to, even though the magazines might tell me it's going to take 5 minutes, in my world, maybe it's going to take 45. And
Right.
so every day from 6 to 7, I'm going to create some time so that I have time to make food and then sit down and enjoy it. Right. So it's like, we have to make the time. And I know that sounds like really tedious. And there's going to be people who are like, but I just want to fly by the seat of my pants. But I can promise you that as you start to like, because we're not just putting, like, I think we're used to using calendars for work things and for hard things. But when we start to put like, I'm going to close my computer so that I can sleep well tonight in our calendar, we're holding space for the things that we're really wanting to bring into our life. It can change so much. And we can start to see, like, in a real container of time, because that's how, that's how we're living on this earth. We start to see how it actually all can unfold. So if I have a to-do list and on it is to write a book or, lose 30 pounds, like, it's going to feel overwhelming if I'm taking responsibility for it today. But if I put it in time and I'm like, oh, well, this month, I'm just going to work on like releasing 2 pounds or writing 1 chapter. And we start to see it over time. You're like, oh my gosh, if I show up to this every day, 8 months from now, I have a book and I live in a different body, like,
Right.
and you can start to see how it's all possible. And usually that's really calming.
For me too, what I have found is a lot of times, like when I'm going to bed at night, or sometimes I've already like put my head down on the pillow and I'm trying to fall asleep, and all of a sudden, like something pops in my mind, right? Like, oh,
Yeah.
don't forget, you have to do whatever. And so for me, I was like, you know what? I'll just grab my phone. I'll open my calendar. I actually just put something on my calendar as a reminder,
Yeah.
so that then I can just be like, okay, it's going to remind me tomorrow, so I don't have to worry about it. And then I can
Yes.
actually relax and not stress about it. So that's one of the things that I do. And then for me, because sometimes unexpected things come up too, and I don't know if I'm always gonna, have that time in the evening to just like cut and chop and do all the things and make a dinner. I do my food prep on the weekend, and
Yeah,
I just figure
absolutely.
out the whole week, and I got my stuff, and I'm like, this can be, lunch, and this could be dinner, and, just do all of that. So I know, like, tonight, if something happens and I'm delayed, I at least have food ready, right? I don't have to worry
Yeah.
about it. And I don't have kids in the house anymore, but I do have sometimes my daughter and grandkids and, son-in-law sometimes pop in unexpectedly too. So it's nice because I'm like, oh, it's easy. I've got something, right? I don't have to figure out now, like, okay, what am I going to do
Well, and
for a quick dinner?
that's literally the benefit of planning, because
Mm-hmm.
you've given enough forethought to know that if you just spend the hour and a half or whatever long it takes you on Sunday to like do that work, you've created this framework that you can
Mm-hmm.
succeed on the thing that you're wanting to do. Whereas when we don't do that and we sort of fly by the seat of our pants, but kind of want everything to be different, it's much harder to show up in that way. So
Mm-hmm.
when we allow ourselves like that forethought, we just make the now so much easier.
Mm-hmm. So you talk about having, a balanced plan and being healthy, and I know we've been talking about this a little bit, but can you go a little bit more detail into that relationship
Tell me again.
to be about having your balanced plan of what you're going to be doing with your health, your life, your all of these,
Yeah.
they're interrelated, right?
Yes.
And so a lot of times people are thinking, well, yeah, health is a result of, just like I said, making these decisions. But if you're actually planning, you were talking about putting on your calendar and thinking about
Yeah.
time, but like, can you just go into a little bit more detail about why it's so important to actually have that plan that's going to result in you being healthy long term?
Yeah, absolutely. So what the way that so first of all, the two things that I like to say most about planning is just making choices. I feel like the
Mhm.
word planning is like, whatever. And I personally have noticed that for most humans that I've worked for, most women that I've worked for, it's easier to make a choice when we're not in overwhelm. So
Mhm.
planning gives us this opportunity to like calm ourselves down, even if that takes an extra 15 minutes, and then plan from a place of like feeling okay and not like making choices from this place of feeling okay versus, you know, it's 6 o'clock and we're trying to decide what's for dinner and we're
Mhm.
stressed and tired and we're going to make a different choice than if we chose in advance when we've given ourselves time to be not stressed.
Mhm.
And the other thing I like to say about planning is it's simply a gift from our past self to our future self so that we can just like be in the now, so that we
Mhm.
can be right here right now, which is exactly like when your kids show up for dinner and your grandkids show up for dinner, like you can be present to them because you've made this food plan and there's
Right.
stuff in the fridge and you're not like, discombobulated. You're like paying attention to them and it's not as much about the food. So I
Mhm.
think that's really the advantage of the advanced part. And then in terms of like balancing all the things, one of the things that we've done just because we've sort of had to, and it's been the way we've developed as humans, is we've sort of
Mhm.
siloed all the different areas. And I think this is really hard for women. So we like have this work life, right?
Mhm.
And then we have this home life. And most of us don't like calendar our home life. I mean, maybe we do if we're
Right.
organized. And then we have this like, and sometimes if the home life includes the food planning, like, I see people put food plans on their fridge or on their chalkboard on their wall, or they'll put their kids like sports school calendars and sports stuff like on the fridge. So it's all sort of, and then a lot of the stuff that we want for ourselves is literally like in our head or in our hearts.
Mhm.
It's like not on paper. And so we end up creating all these silos and it's hard to merge them together. And I think that if we're going to really feel balanced and whole as we navigate our days, we really have to bring all this together into like the one like way to look at our whole lives. And to
Mhm.
me, a calendar or a plan can really help bring all that into balance because when you see it all together, you're like, oh. And when you see that the reason that dinner's not happening is because you're ending work an hour later than you said you would, and then you're having to run to the store, and then you're exhausted, and
Mhm.
then you don't really like cooking because you haven't ever learned how. It's like, no wonder like dinner's not
Mhm.
getting on the table, right? And so then you sit back and you make this plan and you're like, oh, like, so what I really have to work on is not finding more recipes, which is normally what people do when they say they want to get healthy. What I really have to do is focus on how can I close my computer at 4:45 every day? And like, what
Mhm.
do I need to do around that boundary? Who do I need to talk to? What do I need to do for myself? And so we can just start to shift, like we start to shift what we actually do instead
Mhm.
of, I find the way that a lot of us are just sort of conditioned and, to to do all these things that we take on, all the hats that we wear as women, we're so hard on ourselves.
Right.
Um, and so a lot of this is about looking at like the real behaviors that need to change in order for this other thing to change. So a lot of times dinner, like what you make is like 10th on the list if you're really sitting down calmly um, to figure out how to make this happen, because a lot of times it doesn't have to do with the actual food. It has to do with all the things leading up to the moment that's dinner, and
Mhm.
what needs to happen around that. And I've totally lost track of the question you asked me, so I hope that
Well, no,
answers.
that's fine. As you were talking, I was even thinking like two things now. I think, if you used to work outside of the home as well too, and now a lot of positions
Yes.
are remote,
Yes.
that's kind of caused, sometimes some issues too, because where someone used to have, work and then home, and now it's like,
Yeah, there's no boundaries.
yeah, there's all of this stuff going on. So I think that sometimes can complicate it, maybe adding to the overwhelm. But I also think if maybe you're not planning how you're going to be doing certain things during the day and you pick up your phone because you're just going to check one thing, right? And then you're on social media a little bit longer than you expected, and just things kind of like fall apart because you got
Yeah.
down that little rabbit hole of videos or different things too. So I think sometimes if you do have a plan of during this period of time, I'm going to handle, these certain tasks, it prevents you from you know, thinking, oh, I'll just, like you say, fly by night, do things as
Yeah.
it comes up. And then all of a sudden realize you missed something, or you're overwhelmed now because you spent more time doing things, or you got distracted, and, that type of thing. So at least for me, I do like to know that during certain periods of time, I'm doing certain things.
Yeah.
And I do have a calendar where I'll put personal things on there too. It's all one calendar even though, but I might say, okay, I'm going to go to the gym, and work out at this time. And then I'm going to handle this client. And then I'm going to do, these different
Yeah.
things. So for me, that's helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And two things that came up as you just said that were, um one is that, first of all, with this idea of overwhelm, that we keep using that word, one of the things that I always like to remind everyone, is that we say that we're done with overwhelm, right? Because we pretty much are all aware that overwhelm is leading us to burnout, and we don't want
Mhm.
that. And we understand at some level that it's bad, but it's also become like, busy as a badge of honor. It's become like
Mhm.
a way. And so one of the first things we do in our free course is we go through, like, what does overwhelm actually mean to you, and what is the opposite, ease or joy or whatever word you like best. Like, what does that actually mean to you? Because a lot of times we're actually repelling ease and inviting in overwhelm, because somewhere along the line this became, it's almost like easier, like in some weird way, it's almost easier because when you're getting out of overwhelm, you actually have to have tough conversations with people sometimes, and, have boundaries and make choices. And
Mhm.
in the way of overwhelm, you can sort of avoid all that. And so sometimes we have to like take that first step of like what our relationship even is with overwhelm and ease, because
Mhm.
it might not be in alignment with what we say we want. And then the other thing that I just want to remind everyone is that, all of this is a practice, because I'm sure there's someone listening who's like, well, I kind of do that. Like, I put everything in my calendar, but I still don't do anything. And so
Mhm.
it's all a practice. Like, I mean, I make a pretty decent plan, and I actually color code it so that I can see, like, I make an attention for each week. And so like one week might be more work focused. And this particular week where we're recording this is a little bit more kid focused. So it's a week where I've sent a kid off, and I'm getting other people ready for the next season and all the things. And so it's a little bit more family focused. Not to say that I'm not doing work, because here we are
Mhm.
recording this, but when I look at my calendar, like, I color code it so I see if I'm reflecting like my intention for the week, which is super, super helpful. But then I still might, I might have on my calendar to write an email, and I
Mhm.
still might get sucked down an Instagram rabbit hole when I go like research like something that I want to say in the email, right? Like,
Mhm.
this is about a practice. And I think that's really important, because we're so hard on ourselves. And so I think it's
Mhm.
just really important to know that this isn't about like being perfect and doing everything. It's about just having some forethought and getting it into a place so that it feels a little bit better and more contained and more, like
Right.
you can, like, that it all makes sense, because it doesn't make sense in our brain or on a to-do list. And then practicing, like, going through, it's like every day is different, and some days we might be more distracted than other days.
Mhm. Exactly. Well, I know that we have a short period of time left, and I do want to have you share the offer that you wanted to extend to our listeners. So, what is that?
Oh, absolutely. So we have a free course that is called From Overwhelm to Ease. Um, and the goal of that is to give some tools that you can get from overwhelm to ease. So I feel like I've given like little bits that will also
Mhm.
be, um, you know, go deeper in that course. But it starts with this idea of what is overwhelm and ease, and it works its way to a way just to plan your days. So we
Mhm.
have a worksheet or a planning sheet that was really the sheet that I used every day for, I mean, I still use it, but it came out of a way that I started planning when I wanted to lose those 65 pounds. And then when I decided to write a book, and I'm dyslexic, so that wasn't easy.
Mm.
And then with the book, I went on this book tour with my three kids. And so I feel like I kept doing these things that just needed some forethought, didn't feel easy, but I knew that they were what I was supposed to do. And so I used the premise of what became the Today Sheet to do them. So the course takes you through that process so that you also have that tool. and can utilize it on a daily basis.
Perfect. So how would they connect with you to get that course
Yes.
or maybe connect with you on social media?
Yeah. So if you go to plansimple.com, there are many links to the course. And on social media, we're at plansimple.co, on Instagram and Facebook.
Okay, perfect.
yeah.
And we'll have all the information in our show notes as well. So if anyone's listening and you want to, go to the description and find those details and links, do that. But thank you, Mia, for being
Oh,
a guest
thank
on my
you.
show today and, discussing this topic. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been great.
Mhm. I also want to thank you, the listener, for tuning in. I hope that you found this topic interesting and that it answered some of your questions for planning for your work-life balance. If you have any additional questions or comments, be sure to reach out to Mia or send us a message at media@abandp.com. I hope you can join us for our next episode, How to Live Stress-Free Without Stress Management. And please remember, you can connect with us on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And my website is abandp.com. You can find the podcast on multiple favorite podcast platforms, including iTunes, Google, TuneIn, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. And would you please share our show with those you know and leave a review on your favorite platform? I'd really appreciate your support. Until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Biz Help for You. Please join your host, Candy Messer, again next time. Have a terrific day.